And with this experience, Lily has a very, reasonable understanding that despite their actions, despite their pain, despite the turmoil, there was a faint sparkle within these people during this war. And that's a very mature response to all of this, right? Because this could have gone dark in her mind where she's like, oh, I was lied to. Humans ain't shit. She could have been posting on Twitter. This could have red pilled Lilia, okay? And it didn't. Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 153. I'm your host, Ryan, here with the other host, Hetch.
What's going on, everybody? It's good to be back recording after a very fun MomoCon.
Yeah, we can talk real quick about that instead of doing a separate update. But yeah, if you're hearing this was after MomoCon. I know some of our episodes get recorded ahead of time, and it was a great experience. Everyone had fun. A lot of people came out. We thought it was going to be like 20 people, 10 to 20, and it ended up being about 60 plus. Like they filled the room out. Everybody had a good time. Everyone communicated. Everyone was comfortable. That was the great part. We were glad to do it.
A lot of interaction too. Like everybody was engaged like for the whole time.
Yeah.
So it not only was it a big turnout, but the fact that everyone was enjoying themselves was a lot of fun. So if you were a part of it, thank you so much. We had a blast. And hopefully we get to do it again. So that way you can catch the next one.
Yeah, that's the plan. We totally intend on doing it again. So we'll keep you in the loop on that for the following year. But for this episode, we're talking about a story again, a story about a character which recently came to Legends of Runeterra. Yes, it's still alive. It's just a little bit different. And that is Lillia. So before we get into Lillia, let's do housekeeping. Up top, as always, you can listen to us everywhere. Visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info. Email us at podcastcore@gmail.com. Remember, that's podcast COR. Follow us on all the platforms, because that really helps us with discoverability, since we don't really have like any advertisement or sponsors. So we appreciate that. And leave a like and comment wherever you listen. But word of mouth has gotten us this far. So please tell a friend to believe in rehabilitation by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
Yeah, that's right, everybody. This episode is the episode of healing. Let us all meditate for the next 20 minutes, and then you can leave.
Just flute noises playing for the remainder of the episode.
like every 3 to 5 minutes, there's just a random Lilia voice line that just pops up. The hell was that? That's the whole episode.
So before we get into a story best told in 3 parts, we'll start with our general, which is this is a story by David Slagle, which not sure if we've done a story by him. He's done a couple stuff since he is a senior writer. And based on this, man has some chops, right? This is a story that's fairly short, but has a solid message overall, which was surprising with how this story starts, right? Because Runeterra tends to have stories that start playful enough and then end up ending in a dark way that leads you into our current timeline of Runeterra. But this one has some hope, quote unquote, at the end.
Yeah, which also kind of fits more into Lilia's character. I mean, if you listen to some of our other episodes, like with Janna, like there are a lot of characters that tend to be more hopeful. And like, so you have like the dark endings, the hopeful endings, and then like the super goofy endings.
Yeah.
And like, cough, cough, Nico. But this one's going to be, kind of a little bit more uplifting as far as the ending message, which is nice because, this is supposed to be one of like the, nurturing characters for the world itself. So it should be a little bit more uplifting.
Yeah, it sounds like a story of a support, but we all know if you play the game, she's nothing like a support.
yeah, like, she supports through violence.
So part 1 in the story we call The Renewed Dreams, we start with Ionia, which we know is a magical land with many secrets, and one of these secrets is a hidden garden with a tree that gathers the dreams of humanity, which it uses to grow. And this isn't in a way that's like the Shadow Isles. This is a very pure Ionian, untouched way. And This specific grove is called Omikayalan. A mouthful, I'll never say it again, but the tree is the god willow. And there's plenty of names that are used throughout the story for this to refer to both of these things. But this tree also is originally nourished by the Green Father himself, Ivern. So we get a little cameo shout out there.
Yeah, and there is actually like some documented history as far as the God Willow tree, but to get into that, like the actual story of how the God Willow tree became the way that it is now, we would have to cover Ivern's story. So that's for a different episode. For right now, we just are. This is where it's taking place, and we'll get into the history of this place later.
Yeah, exactly. And because we're contractually obligated to record everything, we'll never be able to stop. So at some point, we'll get to it.
If you want it to be sooner rather than later, it's podcastcore@gmail.com.
So one day, for the first time, a dream bud fell from the tree. And before it bloomed and sprouted into this unique creature known as Lillia, which essentially she's a Vastaya. Let's just go with that since this does have some spiritual realm stuff attached to it. It's simple that way. Either she's more like Nico or she's a Vastayan, whatever. It's easier to do it that way. And naturally, she's born of circumstance, nothing really around but this garden and the tree. So what does she do? She naturally tends to the tree and its buds. And through this tree, because remember, these buds on these trees hold humanity's dreams. She's learning about humans through their dreams. So that's her kind of nurturing aspect, right? Nature, not nurture. But in this case, it's both.
Oh god. Yeah, but I mean, like, this is a very interesting way for a character to be brought into the world of Runeterra because, for the sake of storytelling, we're saying that she's Vastayan, and all signs kind of point to being Vastayan. And we really don't know how like the Vastaya really came about. We just know that it's because of Ionia's connection to the spirit realm. So could all Vastayan have come this way? The story says that Lillia is the first of her kind, so not all the other Vastayas would have come this way. So this is something that we could dive into later, but that's like a whole episode itself.
Yeah, I like to think of it very similar to anyone who knows X-Men and how over time the definition of what determines a mutant has shifted and has moved. But ultimately, as a reader, as a fan, you knew what a mutant was, right? And when a mutant tag was attached to something, you knew what to expect. And that's kind of how we treat Vastayan.
Yeah. And that's how we're going to treat it, period, now. So we make the rules. So that's it. Vastayan, done. Mutant tag.
So this takes us to part 2, which is the meat of the story, and she begins to grow attached to humans through their dreams, and this leads to her hoping to meet some in real life one day. Very similar like Nico, right? Very similar to many Yordles, but this dream was so strong that it actually gathered into its own bud on the tree, and she would soon get a chance to meet humans, but it would not be as she dreamed.
Yeah, and our longtime listeners will have an idea of what is happening in Ionia around the time that Lillia finally gets to meet other mortals.
Yeah, this gives us our timestamp of when this is happening, because at this point, Ionia is at war, and there's fewer dreams coming in and being gathered in the God Willow. And there's also this torment outside of the forest that's beginning to make the tree sick and twisted. I mean, think about our Maokai episode, right? It's starting to actually affect the nature itself. And for the tree, instead of buds growing, you're starting to get these infected burls. They're like twisting around the tree and it's emitting, darkness from it. And Lilia's trying her best to tend to this mother tree the best she can because she's never, her existence is unique in general, but this situation is also very unique. So she's having some struggle with this.
Yeah, and for Lillia, this is like her entire world,
Yeah.
because she was born of this tree essentially, and the only interactions that she's had with the world has been produced by this tree. She's never left the garden whose name we will never say again. So like this is a very interesting thing, but there's also no playbook by it because she's the first of her kind, and this twisting of the nature around her is the first of its kind too. So she is getting thrown into a World War II flashback, and she is a veteran at this point, and so she's just shell shocked.
So one night, and this also weakens the barrier. It's not like a physical barrier, but it's the thing that keeps this place hidden. It weakens it, the war that's going on around it. And one night, you have some warriors stumble into this hidden forest who are chasing someone on their way to the dreaming tree. And one of these warriors gets overzealous and swings wildly, and chops down the branch that holds the bud containing Lilia's dream. And she panics, and immediately this emits like a magic from her that forces all of them just to fall asleep.
And if you've played League against Lilia, you know exactly what that's like. Of just like, uh-oh. I have fallen asleep way out of position. Oh no.
Thresh hook out of nowhere.
Yeah, but like this is now like going to go into how we get to Lilia as we know her now, because a lot is going to happen in this instance. So this is just rapid fire of like big updates for Lilia's like life at this point.
Yeah. And this is a rude awakening for her, right? To the potential danger of humans. These are the first ones she's coming into contact with. And it causes her to cry, which is a very natural response in her situation. So while they slept, she noticed that a dream from the person being chased, that was now asleep, made it to the bud on the broken branch since it was closer and not the tree itself. And she picked it up, spoke into it, and then magic swirled around her like pollen, and then throughout the whole garden as well. And this is unique, right? Because like this branch falling, containing her dreams in a bud, then now mixing with this person who was obviously in torment, running from these people. That combining that dream and then her infusing her magic into it because she is a part of the tree as well. You're getting I mean, we bring up Annie and magical pregnancies. I think this fits in that category.
I mean, it really does, because like the branch in question is the branch that was initially carrying her dream. So, and it wasn't a dream of the victim going to the tree. It was a dream of the victim going into the bud that was her dream.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of just different things all getting mixed up in this magic cauldron that is going to lead to the point of like Lilia becoming who we know her as. There's just a lot going on. So yeah, it's definitely the Annie scenario of like magic and pregnancies, weird things that are going to happen.
Yeah. And this takes us to part 3 to wrap up the story. So soon the humans wake up, and one by one, they don't know what's going on, why they're here, and what they were doing. And Lilia is watching and waiting to see what happens behind the tree. They can't see her, and they're confused, and they just decide to leave. And with this experience, Lily has a very reasonable understanding that despite their actions, despite their pain, despite the turmoil, there was a faint sparkle within these people during this war. And that's a very mature response to all of this, right? Because this could have gone dark in her mind where she's like, oh, I was lied to. Humans ain't shit. She could have been posting on Twitter. This could have red pilled Lilia, okay? And it didn't.
Yeah, and like it's weird that she did react this way too, because it is, like you said, a mature response, because up to this point she's literally been living in her daydreams. Like the only interaction that she's had with humans is the dreams of humans. Our dreams are so much better than what the reality of life is, and that's no different than the humans on Runeterra. So the fact that she, like, the only experience that she had was living a daydream, and then like the first instance of seeing what reality is like, oh, okay, there's still some hope here and I can nurture that. That's some strength. That's some real strength there. So it does show like Lilia's character.
Yeah.
But I do also like that despite, seeing the growth in her character, it's like she put all these dudes to sleep and it was still just like, oh shit, they're waking up. Nah, I'm gonna hide and just watch from the shadows. I'm just gonna creep on them. Like she's still just like, nah, I ain't sure about these guys.
Yeah, her being a great choice from a design perspective for them choosing her to be like a part deer, essentially, because her mannerisms, her being very shy, timid, does fit that animal very well.
Yeah.
So props there from the design team. But she decides after this moment that if dreams can no longer make it to the tree during this time of war, she would bring the God Willow to them through this branch, which is like a divine message in a sense. So she grabs the branch, leaves the garden, and joins the world of humans. And she was excited about finally following her dream, but also she's timid and afraid of what's to come, but she's made a decision.
Yeah, and I like that. Like this is all just like some like big courage moments for such a young being.
Yeah.
And to think that like it comes off of the fact of like again you immediately see the war. Like,
Yeah.
like that is like she's just like all right, cool, soldier up, let's go.
I
Like
I imagine it like a harrowing visual from like if this was a cinematic where towards the end of the cinematic, her walking out of this, enchanted garden through this veil into a burning Ionia, right? And that, with blissful music playing in the background, just
yeah.
for some juxtaposition. But
Oh
that's
yeah.
how I see it in my mind, which is kind of a cool scene.
Like I see it in my mind of like, the beautiful forest and then it's like Lilia just staring at the camera with the doughboy helmet on and then like with in the meme format of like the stressed out soldier like that's how I'm imagining it. It's just like, oh my god.
So the same image. We have
And Pentakill's playing in the background of mine.
So that wraps up our story where now Lilia just travels Runeterra, specifically Ionia, helping others realize their dreams while remaining out of sight, right? Doing it from the background. And this act of kindness is helping her realize her own dreams, and it brings joy, not only to her mentally, but physically, she's beginning to change as well, because she was born from a flower. So her body has these attributes on it, and they're starting to bloom as well every time she's doing these things. So nurturing is the hope of humanity is now her mission, and that's what she's going to do to combat the current darkness that's going on. And where that ends up, I mean, we'll find out.
Yeah, I really love the way that like the story kind of ends with her, experiencing her dream and nurturing the dreams of humanity because it does leave a very big question there, which is what effect does her work have on the God Willow tree?
Yeah.
We don't know. We don't know. And I don't think Lilia knows either. Like, she just knows that it's like, okay, well, if the dreams aren't coming, I got to go get them.
Yeah.
And so she's getting the dreams and bringing them back, but we don't know like what would happen if Lilia doesn't bring the dreams back. We don't know what would happen if the brambles or the burrs were like to be taking over the tree more than the dream buds.
Yep.
Like we don't know what any of that would be like, what would that would be like because of Lilia's work that she now does. So she may be going out and living her dream and like I'm gonna be that little country girl going to the big city to make it as a star in New York. Like she's off doing that in her head, but she is also like preserving the garden that will never be named again.
Yeah.
So like we don't know what effect that has on the rest of Runeterra because clearly it's got to have like some kind of big effect since it's gathering dreams from literally all over. So it leaves a nice question mark there that the story could always go back to and can be grown upon. So I love it when stories kind of wrap up like this as far as just giving you the character without answering like all the questions.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and brings me to a point about just the narrative attempts Runeterra does where they always try to avoid. I say always. The majority of the time, they try to avoid the John Everyman does everything type of bio, where a lot of characters have motivations that are very focused and specific. It's not I have to save the world. It's no, I'm doing this thing, and how that thing affects this wider world of so much going on is led for or left for when the story progresses and characters intermingle, and it makes it so much more real because even with the amount of powerful beings we've have and have gone over, right? No one being can do everything, can handle everything that's happening in Runeterra, in the cosmos of Runeterra, in the void. Like everyone has their role to play. That's kind of a callback to our book club stuff if you've followed all the way through that. But Hetch makes a great point that she has her mission, and how will her mission affect other people's missions? One example you can look at is, recently we did a Master Yi episode. If you've seen the trailer or the cinematic affiliated with him, like even his mission during the war, he's kind of going back and forth between participating in certain battles, coming back to his hometown and cleaning up the mess, right? Cleaning up overgrowth and cleaning up the evil spirits and stuff like that. And then he has to leave again. So when he leaves, he's no longer there tending. So what happens? So like, is she doing that? And what if something happens to her? She can't make it back. What does that do, right? So that's how good Riot is, or the Riot writers are, at keeping this stuff very consistent thematically on these approaches.
Yeah. And we appreciate like the fact that it's that good, because this something that we always kind of go back to is that like with characters that have a story that has a bigger impact on a region, or possibly like Runeterra itself, than what their story gives off. Like those are the kinds of stories that we're interested in seeing. Like, is that going to be translated into the MMO?
Mhm.
Because that this would be a really cool side quest kind of thing, or not even a side quest, like almost like a faction kind of deal of like, hey, you want to go out in the world and help Lillia get some dreams to keep the God Willow alive? Like, come on, like there are dreams out there. Let's go catch them. And then, or like saying just like, oh, like something does happen to Lillia, and then like you as the player have to go on a series of quests to figure out what happened to Lillia so she could go back to work, because something else happened, like, because we don't know what would happen if she doesn't go back to work, right?
Yeah.
So those are the kind of questions that could be answered in the MMO format. And that would be a lot of fun to see, because it would be like interacting with the different pieces of nature within like that garden and the God Willow tree, as well as seeing like what characters Lillia has been taking an interest in, because she is still very curious too, because her only contact with the outside world has been through dreams, and she's now realizing that the reality is very different than the dreams. But there are pieces of those dreams within the reality. So what dreams did she see and connect with that she wants to go and see in person? Because could you imagine like she's watching like the dreams of like Set, and Set just being like, I love mom. I want my mom to be taken care of.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'm going to go meet this mama's boy.
And then she's in a fight club.
Is she in a fight club?
I hate it when that happens.
It's like catch these hands.
That's a great point.
Could you imagine that storyline?
That's the type of shit we want from an MMO, right? That's the good paint, baby.
Slap it on my Corolla.
So with that, we'll wrap it up there. Like we said, it's a short story, and it's a pleasurable one, so we appreciate that. But as always, thanks for hanging out. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next episode.
Yeah, take care, everybody.